I'm back! It's been a little while now, but I'm ready to talk about the third saga of One Piece, the Sky Island Saga, and offer my first impressions. If this is your first time coming across the channel, hi! You stumbled upon my One Piece series where I go through the anime and offer my initial thoughts on the narrative, characters, and themes presented in the show. If you're returning to this series, hey! Before moving into the meat of this topic, I want to address something. One of the major criticisms I've seen on the last couple of videos I've made in this series is that there is too much summary and not enough analysis, so I'm going to try mixing things up in this video. Instead of discussing the exact progression of the narrative and pausing to offer my thoughts, I'm going to talk about topics that may bounce around a bit, but I'm still going to try and bring things up in the order presented by the show as much as I can. That's also a complicated way of telling you that if you've never seen this saga of One Piece before, this video is going to be confusing for you. So, get out of here. Go on, get! While this is probably the worst saga of One Piece so far, it still has its moments, and I think it's worth watching without spoilers. Did I just tip my hand? So, I've essentially avoided all One Piece content like the plague to avoid spoilers, and I don't want anything to influence my own videos. Like it or not, I'm all natural, baby, so I never know when I'm saying something that's obvious in the fandom until after I publish a video and get bombarded with comments. That is all to say that I have no idea how the Sky Island Saga is viewed within the One Piece community, but honestly, as a noob watching this for the first time, this saga almost got me to give up on the show. It's really strange because I think that the Jaya Arc is absolutely fantastic, and the momentum the series builds with the ascent into the sky is perhaps as hyped as I'd ever been while watching the show, but by the end of the Skypiea Arc, I was honestly pretty bored and pissed at how things had progressed, up until the last episode or two, but I'm a sucker for a Straw Hat Party, you know that by now. With those overall thoughts on the saga out of the way, let's get into the specific topics that I want to talk about, beginning, of course, with the Jaya Arc. I want to pick up with where we last left the Straw Hats after Alabasta, specifically with their new crew member, Nico Robin. I know there was some filler between Alabasta and Jaya, but I didn't watch it, so as far as I'm concerned, Jaya is where we really see Nico Robin as part of the crew, and I like how right away this saga utilizes Robin's unique skills as a historian. At first, I was kind of confused with how a historian would be valuable to the Straw Hats, but the writing is so excellent in the show that I immediately understood Robin's value. This saga is so entrenched in the history of certain civilizations in a way that the prior two sagas just weren't, and by developing a history which explains the motivations and circumstances of the present-day story, a need is created for a communication between past and present, which can only be funneled through a character like Robin. The first inkling we get of Robin's usefulness to the crew comes with a ship falling from the sky, and her value never really wanes from there. I thought she was utilized incredibly well right away, and I was impressed. Speaking of ships falling from the sky, that brings me to the insanity of the Grand Line. This is another element of the storytelling that has continuously blown me away. The Jaya Arc delivers more successfully than maybe anything else so far on how utterly insane, nonsensical, and wondrous the Grand Line is. In the span of a couple of episodes, a 200-year-old ship falls out of the sky, a team of divers led by some large monkey man show up to scavenge it, and massive giants appear before them all, dwarfing everything and darkening the world. I have to tell you that when those giants appeared, I freaked the fuck out, and my feelings felt justified as the rest of the typically unfazed crew decided to immediately haul ass to save their lives. It isn't too often the crew members get beaten by anything, but this display of fear grounded them in a way the series sometimes struggles with. I know that these don't turn out to be giants, which honestly I think is deeply disappointing, but this moment was still powerful and lingered with me until the end of this saga. After fleeing for their lives and discussing the possibility of an island in the sky, and Luffy's immediate infatuation with going there on an adventure, the crew travel to Mocktown in order to get some info. I think that when the crew first touches down in Mocktown is probably the messiest part of this arc. It makes more sense toward the end when it's revealed the loons around town are all part of Blackbeard's crew, but I don't think anything is that interesting to start with, and by just throwing stuff at the audience, the whole setup feels muddled. It isn't bad, it just isn't as engaging as the rest of the arc, which brings me to the character of Bellamy. I think that on paper, Bellamy serves as a really interesting foil to Luffy specifically, and the Straw Hats more broadly. He is an absolute tool who is so anti-dreams that it makes me wonder how anyone can stand being around him, and surprise surprise, my problem with his character is that he's really annoying. I get that I'm not supposed to like him, but I don't mean annoying in a Miss Merry Christmas way. It's hard to describe, but it feels like the show wants me to think he's cool when he is so bland. I think his design feels as generic as his nickname, the Hyena, which is one of the most uninspired things a villain could possibly call himself. I think his spring fruit powers are fun, but don't really get shown off too much. Essentially, the only thing I enjoy about Bellamy is the thematic role he serves in the story and seeing him bounce around. Otherwise, he bores me. The beating that Luffy and Zoro take at the hands of Bellamy wasn't that interesting to me either. I get what the story is trying to say about Luffy not bothering to fight someone who is both close-minded and not an obstacle in his journey, but at the same time, I feel like the moment was forced. I really don't see any reason why Luffy and Zoro would take the beating other than that they are in a story and it's an interesting character beat. I get why they wouldn't fight, but they could have just walked out the door, especially with Nami in there with them. I just think removing themselves from the situation rather than taking a beating for some overarching thematic purpose makes more in-story sense, while the fact that they did take that beating kind of took me out of the story and felt more heavy-handed than normal. However, the confidence that Bellamy feels afterward is important setup for the real confrontation, and I guess having Luffy lose in the eyes of Bellamy was a shortcut to build up to the emotional payoff for their fight. I just think it could have been handled better. Now to take a break from Bellamy and talk about my favorite character in this arc, Montblanc Cricket. This man is the embodiment of the theme of this overall saga, and although his screen time is limited, he feels present throughout the next arc because he makes such an impact on Luffy. Montblanc Cricket is the descendant of Montblanc Noland, or Noland the Liar, who is the subject of a silly little children's story told in the North Blue. The story goes that Noland told a king about a city of gold, but when they arrived, they found nothing and Noland was executed for lying, but until his dying day claimed the city of gold was real and that it must have sunk. It just so happens that Jaya is where Noland's supposed city of gold was located. Cricket doesn't have a strong conviction either way if Noland was a liar or not, but he feels it's his calling to find out, so every day he dives down into the sea, searching for evidence. I'm going to get to why I think Cricket serves this story so well in a moment, but to do that, I need to talk about Bellamy once again. So Bellamy catches word that Cricket has got his hands on some gold, and being the annoying sack of dog shit that he is, naturally he shows up to beat up an old man and steal that gold. This is where the real thematic conflict of this arc comes into play. Bellamy tells Cricket that there is no place for dreams in the new world, and Cricket fires back with this line. And that's really what this arc is all about. What is a true pirate in the world of One Piece? Bellamy's definition is clearly a more criminally driven, power-based person who does whatever he wants and operates outside of morality, while Cricket and Luffy both feel that a true pirate is driven by their dreams. Luffy, upon finding out that Cricket's dream of searching for the City of Gold was infringed on by Bellamy, acts as an extension of Cricket's will and finally goes to kick Bellamy's ass. I love how the scene with Luffy's fight against Bellamy plays out. Honestly, I wish Bellamy got a little more fucked up a little quicker. I think that would have had more of an impact on showing the audience how utterly incorrect Bellamy's entire philosophy is, as well as recontextualizing the beating Luffy took earlier, but it was still a very satisfying outcome. Before I end my discussion on this arc, I want to talk about the themes of this arc, which really are the themes of the entire saga: dreams and romanticism. From the very beginning in the East Blue Saga, it was clear that dreams were going to play a big role in this story. Once the characters get to Whiskey Peak, the show kind of veered off into a different thematic direction, but this third saga goes back to the idea of being driven by dreams in a huge way. The reason that I like the character of Cricket so much is that he is this old man who you'd think would be beaten down by the world to the point of becoming at least a little cynical, but it's actually through his character that I think the series is able to make concrete how important the pursuit of dreams is to being a true pirate, but also the idea of romanticism. I think the philosophy of the entire series boils down to that one word. When Cricket says his farewell, he tells Luffy that no one in history has ever disproved the existence of the City of Gold or the Sky Island, then goes on to say, I think this farewell between these two characters puts into words the overarching theme of the story, which has been present ever since the beginning with Romance Dawn. Since this overall saga is all about pursuing your dreams, no matter how unlikely they seem, I felt this was a really pivotal moment for the series to make this statement, and it really stuck with me. Of course, the show continues this thread as the crew blasts off into the sky, and if you could distill the sensation that watching those episodes gave me into a drug, it would be ecstasy. Unlike any story that I've ever seen, I'm constantly blown away by how well One Piece can invoke a raw sense of adventure on screen and bubble up this kind of energy in my soul that straight up makes me want to get on a boat and sail out to sea. I think this was such a well done sequence, similar to the entrance into the Grand Line, but even more wondrous with unlimited potential on the horizon. It's the emotional high of this whole saga for me. So, upon arriving in the sky, we are discovering the rules of this world with the crew, which is always a fun way to tell a story. The standout moment of this section for me is when Usopp straight up falls through the clouds. I think that was hilarious and really hammered home how different the rules of the sky are. Of course, we also have Wyper show up, then Gonfall the Sky Knight arrives on Pierre, and the world of the sky is solidified as utterly crazy. Not a bad way to set things up, and the setting itself is beautiful and seems out of a dream. The Straw Hats then land in Angel Village, which is cool, but I don't have much to say about it. I do really like Conus, particularly later in the arc, but I could not give less of a fuck about her dad. I think the more interesting aspect of this section of the story is how the show makes it seem like the Straw Hats might actually be in heaven and might meet God. The first display of Eneru's powers is a really stunning scene, and I have to admit I was very curious about who this God character was and what impact his presence meant for the future of the show. This wasn't quite up there with the appearance of the giants in blowing my mind, but it was pretty close. Also, like a lot of key moments in the saga, it was beautifully animated. This brings me to another thread that I'd like to pick up on, which is more thematic than narratively focused: the crew's attitude toward death and adventure. After Nami rushes back to the crew after seeing Eneru's power, and after she absolutely slammed the Wyper captain with her waiver over his ridiculous fine, Luffy and Nami discuss what the crew should do next. Nami wants to leave, while Luffy is beyond eager to visit Upper Yard, simply because it's a place they aren't supposed to go. In this exchange, Luffy asks Nami, "What's more important to you, life or adventure?" Nami, of course, responds, "Life, then money," but honestly, I don't even believe that from her. I think that this section of the story continues the thread established in Jaya, that when the chips are down, the Straw Hats are always going to choose romanticism, dreams, and adventure over life and regret. This point is delivered on again when Conus is leading Luffy, Sanji, and Usopp into Upper Yard. Conus tells them that they could die, and Luffy says that he knows, and then similar to what he said to Crocodile in their final fight, accepts the possibility of his death without remorse. Meanwhile, the White Beret captain has been crawling around behind the scenes and thinks to himself that all the Blue Sea dwellers that have come before them talk a big game about dreams, but when they are faced with danger, they treasure their lives above everything. After Eneru's attack on Conus, the Straw Hats continue their journey to Upper Yard, stunning the captain. This episode serves the purpose of yet again telling the audience what makes the Straw Hats so special. Everyone expects them to value their lives over dreams, and each time they overcome those expectations without a second thought. Oh, also, Conus' dad made his daughter escort the Straw Hats to what they believe to be a death sentence like an absolute cuck. I get that they are forced to do it, but there's no reason it couldn't have been him instead of her. Then he's whining in his room all alone. Straight up, fuck this guy. Moving on. So everyone is heading to Upper Yard, and that's pretty much the setting for the remaining 36 episodes, which is about 70% of this whole saga, nearly 85% of the Skypiea arc, so I think it's worth talking about a bit. This setting makes the fact that the entire arc is actually taking place in some wondrous land in the sky seem pretty meaningless. The idea of Upper Yard is cool. I think it's interesting seeing a landmass in the clouds, but it isn't interesting enough to take over the entire story. It felt like this arc and all these different battles could have really taken place anywhere. It didn't feel like it was using the setting of the Sky Islands to their fullest. The clouds that were so novel now just become differently drawn water, and for an arc that started out so creative to crap on its own concept with a bland forest setting was a massive letdown for me. Yes, there are some clouds around to spice it up, but mostly the setting is just a big forest and ancient ruins. I would have liked it if it was featured 50% less, but for the entire arc to take place on a mossy patch of dirt after building up for the entire previous arc this heavenly setting was a disappointment. At this point in the story, the crew is separated, and if you can't tell by now, this whole entrance to Upper Yard really did not do it for me. Nami, Zoro, and Robin just feel like they are on a long walk that leads nowhere except for one reveal at the very end, while Chopper does his thing to guard the Going Merry, which is entertaining enough. Though the real bulk of this story for this section comes from Luffy, Sanji, and Usopp's battle with one of the 4 priests of Upper Yard, Satori, and I really don't enjoy this fight at all. The reason I don't like it is because it has no consequence on the story other than just telling some of the characters about mantra, which doesn't influence how the characters progress anyway. My enjoyment of a fight goes beyond hard punches and cool powers. There needs to be a story impact, and the best fights leave the characters in a different place afterward, so this fight comes off as padding. Satori's death does inspire the Shandians to attack Upper Yard, but that is an impact for characters uninvolved in the fight, and Wyper was just checking it out a couple hours prior, so something tells me they'd attack soon anyway. Overall, I hated this whole section, but I did get a kick out of Sanji's finishing move. Get it? Kick? This arc is a real roller coaster. Just when I think it's beginning to suck, it pulls me back in. The part of this arc I'm talking about is of course when they realize that Upper Yard is part of Jaya and that the City of Gold exists. That is such a dreamer's concept and harkens back to the real-world myth of El Dorado, and every single moment of the crew talking through what this means for them gives me the feels. Also, I have to hand it to Oda that this was excellent storytelling. The City of Gold was set up just enough in the prior arc that it makes sense to propel the plot forward with this unexpected reveal and tie everything together, making it a cohesive saga. The scene of everyone agreeing to look for the gold is such a fun one. This arc in particular is really more about the Straw Hats being outsiders than pirates, so using treasure as their motivator ties things back into their roots and just offers a really fun tone that gets you excited to go on this stereotypical pirate treasure hunt, something this pirate series hasn't included until now. When Luffy screams that the gold is theirs, I nearly cried tears of joy. Okay? God damn, do I want to be a pirate. Before I get moving into the survival game, I want to focus in on Wyper and the Shandians/Shandorians. Pretty much the rest of the Shandians are background extras except for Lackey and Isa, so there isn't too much to say about them in particular, but I have mixed feelings on Wyper as a character. He felt really boring for a long time. He's just an angry dickhead, and his own people call him a demon, which I guess is supposed to be some kind of antithesis to the God of Upper Yard, but that illusion is dropped fairly early on. That's kind of a problem I have with everything having to do with Wyper and the Shandians, even down to their character design. It all just kind of feels slapped together. It bothers me so much that they have wings that I had to look up if there is a reason, and of course there is. I guess they also come from the moon, just like the Sky Islanders, and happen to land in a different place, but hey, that is so complicated, it feels like someone is trying to cover their ass. It feels like Wyper was designed with wings because he's the first person the Straw Hats come across in the sky, but then Oda decided to make him a Shandian later on, but then had to make all the Shandians have wings too. The logic for the story is there, regardless of how it happened, but the fact that they all have wings is so odd to me, and I feel like it takes away from the actual conflict visually. It just feels like a battle between angels rather than an actual group of displaced natives trying their best to survive in a new environment. Also, no one ever acknowledges the wings. No one calls attention to it, no one seems to even care, both in the present and in the past when Noland encounters them. It feels like the wings only exist for the viewer, and they have no impact on the story itself. Something just feels off about them, and personally, I can't stand it. Anyway, my larger point was that the Shandians feel extremely hollow until the flashback to Noland and Calgara. Wyper could have been an awesome character. I really like him at the very end of this arc, and there is no reason that his motivation had to be revealed so late in the story. It just felt like an afterthought to humanize a bland character, and that's really disappointing, especially because his people take up such a chunk of screen time, and we don't even know all their true deep motivations until long after they're all dead. Overall, I think the Shandians are symbolic of this story biting off a bit more than it could chew, and not really providing anything but surface-level explanations for most of the ongoing action, which is atypical for this show. Now to talk about something I really like to balance out my vibes. I think the dials are such a cool concept. They are pretty much just bottled magic, but they make sense in the context of the story, and I think their inclusion keeps the action feeling fresh without reverting to giving everyone devil fruit powers. This arc does a great job of mixing up the fighting and power sets, and in a way that can benefit someone without powers, which is great. With all that said, let's get into the survival game. I'm going to focus on each of the Straw Hats battles in this section and give my thoughts, but I'll try to keep it as concise as I can since we still have a lot more to get through. First things first, Zoro battles one of the Shandian warriors, and this fight is entertaining enough. Mostly it serves to answer the question, what the hell would Zoro do against a long-distance fighter, and answers it by giving him a new distance attack in the form of the 36-pound Phoenix, which again gets upgraded a whole 3 times by his next battle. Not much else to talk about with this one, except from here on out, Zoro is teamed up with a massive Southbird, who ironically is pointing in the direction Zoro needs to head, while Zoro stumbles around lost in the forest with his horrible sense of direction, which I absolutely adore. Next up, Luffy and Wyper have a brief clash which mostly boils down to Luffy just ballooning himself up to deflect Wyper's bazooka attacks, but before things can go any further, Luffy is swallowed by a giant snake, whose design I love, and Luffy is trapped for a major part of this arc. Luffy being trapped somewhere or otherwise indisposed, thus keeping him from the fight, is a trope that this series has relied on pretty heavily up to this point, but I actually don't have a problem with this instance at all. The fact that he has no idea where he is and is just bumbling around trying to get out is comedic gold, and I love every second of it. It really fits his character, and is about as logical, if completely insane, a way to keep Luffy on the back burner. And it allows the rest of the cast to shine a bit more during this survival game. Next up, we got our young buck Chopper on the scene. Chopper goes up against one of the priests solo, and I was actually really happy with this fight. It is my favorite of this section. I think seeing Chopper fight alone and win against the Skypunk was perfect. It's a good beat for his character and gives the underdog of the group a major win in a short but satisfying battle, and it felt realistic to Chopper's strengths. He's too smart and dedicated to lose to a guy who literally has no basic control over his body. At this point in the story, Chopper feels that no one can rely on him because he's always running away, and this time he has to stand his ground. Personally, I think he's being pretty hard on himself considering his stance on the Mary and his big fight with Usopp in the prior saga, but I'm willing to accept that mindset as an internal character thing rather than some kind of story flaw. When Chopper wins, he begins to repeatedly say, "I'm finally a pirate," and again, I just thought that was great character writing. Makes me happy to see the little guy get a confidence boost. At this point in the story, Nami, Sanji, Usopp, and Gonfall are traveling on the Going Merry to reach a rendezvous point to pick up the others after they raid the City of Gold. However, Eneru strolls up and pretty much takes Usopp and Sanji out for the rest of the story. They do each get a little heroic moment by the end, but pretty much they're superfluous to the overall narrative following their fight with Satori, and I think that's a shame. I guess Oda felt like he was balancing too many characters and decided to take 2 out for a while. I can accept Usopp because he has been getting some character growth throughout the story thus far, but Sanji has really been the most static character of the crew, and to see him knocked out for such a huge chunk of this arc was pretty disappointing. Although, the scene itself played out nicely and really invoked the fear that Eneru is supposed to give off. Now it's time to move on to the new girl and see what she can really do. Although Robin was one of the primary antagonists of the prior saga, we've never really gotten to see her use her Devil Fruit powers in combat to the extent that we do in this section. I think her first real fight as a member of the Straw Hats does a great job of establishing 2 things: her respect for history, and solidifying her Devil Fruit powers as formidable in a fight. When you say someone can sprout limbs, it doesn't exactly scream intense battle capabilities, so it was entertaining seeing her powers used this way. This fight is a close second for me, right after Chopper's, because it provides so much information on Robin that we peripherally understood, but now we get to see her drive directly. Once she gets away from the ruins and cuts loose, it's a beautiful massacre to witness. She breaks this big dude's fucking neck after sending him flying over a cliff and just before he could hit the ground where he likely would have died anyway. She's cold-blooded, and I love her commitment to defending relics of the past. Definitely a fun watch. With the survival game nearly complete, we have the final obstacle before taking on Eneru, the priest Ohm, and his dog, Holy. This fight is pretty chaotic and promising. There are beats that happen that drive the plot forward and set the stakes well, but the action itself is kind of anticlimactic and just feels like a warm-up round for the upcoming Eneru Smackdown. Zoro defeats Ohm with an upgraded version of his new special attack, and that's that. This brings me to the character of Eneru, a character who you've probably noticed I haven't said much about yet, even though he's the primary antagonist. Well, as he is about to take center stage for the rest of this arc, I think now is a good time to talk about him. I have mixed feelings on Eneru. I think as a character, he is a really interesting concept with one of the most unique and terrifying power sets we have seen thus far in the series. I also think he's boring as hell. The problem with how this arc is structured is that it rests on whether or not Eneru works for you as a viewer. The entire story since arriving in the sky has been centered around how Eneru will interact with the Straw Hats and whether or not they can withstand the power of God. The initial displays of his power are terrifying. How easily he takes out Usopp and Sanji shows us the impact of his power on a personal level, and his foreshadowing of events with his prophecy about the survival game gives him this aura of wise, malevolent mysticism. By the end of the survival game, I think the stage was set for one of the most interesting villains the show had ever seen. I wanted to know who he was, why he was doing what he was doing, how he got to be in this position of absolute power, and how he began to think of himself as God. However, none of that really happens. I had so many questions about Eneru, I still do, and the few answers we did get were so quickly glossed over as to be irrelevant. I don't know anything about Eneru except that he likes dirt and wants to be around more dirt. Yes, I'm downplaying the endless Vearth thing. It is kind of interesting in the context of this arc. However, it ultimately comes off as kinda throwaway because who really cares? His desire for that doesn't really impact his conflict with the Straw Hats, or the Shandians, or the Sky Islanders, because that dream of endless Vearth has nothing to do with his actions in the climax of the story. The real conflict is Eneru's desire to destroy Upper Yard and the Sky Islands in order to, I guess, cleanse the sky to be as it should in his role as God. But why? Why would he think the Sky Islands are unnatural if he is also from some other Sky Island elsewhere? I guess it's possible that a native Sky Islander could think this way, but it seems like there would have to be a deeper reason behind that worldview, and maybe there is, but we certainly don't ever get told it. I think that Eneru's motivation should have been tied in with his desire to destroy Upper Yard and Skypiea, because that would actually put him firmly at odds with the other players in this arc. Instead, his actions in the climax seem like an afterthought that he struggles through just because he feels like it, but he has the option of leaving at any time, and it wouldn't be that big of a deal to him. And we see this by the end. After he's defeated, he's just like, well, whatever, I'm going to the moon! Don't get me wrong, his defeat was somewhat satisfying, and I like that they didn't kill the big villain because I think there's potential for him in the story still. My problem is that Eneru feels more like an idea than a fleshed out character, and once he takes center stage, he falters because he doesn't have too much to offer. The coolest aspect of Eneru was the mystery, and when that falls away, all we're left with is a long earlobed creep who doesn't have wings for some reason. This actually brings me back to the character of Ohm, because I think that his motivation was more in line with how Eneru should have been presented. Ohm is all about issuing brutal divine judgment as some twisted form of mercy. He wants to save people and bring balance through destruction. Ohm doesn't give us too much to work with, and I don't think that motivation is anything groundbreaking, but I wish the idea was explored a bit more with the character of Eneru, which would tie directly into his motivation to destroy the Sky Islands. He touches on it a little that it's his duty as God, but I never got the impression that he actually felt like it was his duty. It more felt like it was something he thought would be fun to entertain himself. Like, if he actually had to work hard to destroy the Sky Islands, I don't think he'd put in the same effort to do so as he did to build his arc. That's the best way I can describe why I felt let down by him as a character. Alright, now that I can hear the clatter of keyboards typing away, let me move on to the section of the story that takes place after the survival game, what I'm calling the end game. This is when Eneru comes to face the survivors and offer them a place on his arc for some reason. We have Zoro, Robin, Gonfall, Wyper, and Nami, with Luffy and Isa still trapped in the big ol' snake at this time. I will say that I enjoy the setup of this confrontation, with everyone united against Eneru, and I also enjoy the pacing of this whole beatdown. It doesn't tease things out too long, gives everyone somewhat of a moment, but at the end of the day, they are lambs to the slaughter and can't stand up to this god. The best moment from this fight is probably when Wyper uses the rejectile with the Sea Stone Prism. Do I think it's horseshit that it was set up that a person can only use a rejectile once without taking life-threatening injury, and this is the second and not even final time that Wyper uses the rejectile? Hell yeah. But it doesn't take away from this moment. I also really like how Nami plays her cards in this situation. From the beginning, she's been the one most terrified of Eneru's power, and by the end of this fight has had 3 instances to watch him unleash his seemingly unstoppable might. It makes sense that Nami would try and buy herself some time by manipulating Eneru. If she wants to live to escape, it's really her only option. Meanwhile, after Conus and her father came across a member of the Divine Squad who told them about Eneru's plan, Conus' father sacrificed his life so that Conus could escape, and now she's rolling up to Angel Island to warn everyone. She is driven to save as many people as she can, even if it means behaving outside of her typical kind and unassuming way. When she is ducking the Wyper rays and soars up to the shore with that bazooka strapped to her back, I was stunned that this was the same character, and yet it fit with everything we knew about her. This is by far Conus' best moment. It really makes the beginning setup of this arc on Angel Island worth it, and ties the characters, like the White Beret Captain, back into the story in an organic way, and builds up the stakes for the coming battle against Luffy and Eneru. Conus also has to convince the angels not to wait for a miracle, but to act for themselves. I think that this is interesting commentary on the complacency of people, and kind of a similar beat to when Vivi was begging for the Alabastians to stop their fighting, and yet different enough. Overall, I dug it. Now to the main event, Luffy confronting Eneru. I'm not trying to flex my big wet brain or anything, but the reveal that Luffy is immune to Eneru's lightning because he's a rubber man was something that I figured was gonna happen, but I also recognize that's not something everyone would know, and although the reveal wasn't shocking to me, the look of utter surprise on Eneru's face certainly made it worth it. There are some good comedy bits in here, like when Luffy goes Ultra Instinct for a hot sec, and the action payoffs are fun, like with the ricocheting Gum Gum Gatling attack. I don't have much else to say other than I love the continuation of Luffy utterly disrespecting the main antagonist at every opportunity he gets. It's nice when he takes them down a peg verbally, even before he can successfully do so physically. But of course, this story needs to be padded out some more, so Luffy gets some gold melted around his arm and pushed off the arc. Which leads into the revival of our unconscious duo, Sanji and Usopp, just in time for the story to finally have something for them to do. I already said before that they kind of got screwed in this arc, but this is the one moment for each character that gets them back in the action in a satisfying enough way. Sanji gets to be his badass self, saving Nami and Usopp while sabotaging the ship, and Usopp gets to stand up to God and inject some serious comedy into the story. It's nothing major for either character in terms of development, and at this point it was pretty glaring that Sanji would continue to be the least developed crew member thus far, which remains disappointing. Between the action of the crew's escape from Eneru's ship and the beginning destruction of the Sky Islands, we are flashed back 400 years in perhaps the worst pacing shift this series has had thus far. We transition from rising action of the major climax and are just thrown into a barely set up flashback which is much slower paced, stretched out, and ends up being repetitive, which really throws off the momentum of this arc. I said it before and I'll say it again. This background should have been established earlier to give us a better sense of Wyper and the Shandians' motivations, but also to not entirely throw off the rhythm of the action. I don't know if it was this way in the manga as well, but the anime version surely feels off. So this flashback shows us the meeting of Montblanc Noland, or Noland the Liar, and the great Shandian warrior, Calgara. I think that this flashback was an interesting idea, tying in the two threads of the past we've been hearing throughout this whole saga together and telling their story as one. My second biggest problem with this section, aside from the pacing, is that the Shandians come off like bipolar assholes, especially Calgara. They start out hating Noland's men, then absolutely love them, then go to despising them more than ever, and then weeping as they depart. I mean, Noland and Calgara are practically making out for days, and then Calgara finds out that Noland's men cut down his ancestors' trees and refuses to even talk to Noland about it. What a huge fucking baby. Obviously, Noland didn't know. Obviously, he didn't do it on purpose. I just think that this last-minute conflict, after the initial conflict was already resolved, just felt like unnecessary padding. Noland could have just left. Do we need to go back and forth one more time with these guys? Get back to the main story already. Ugh. The most important thing that happens in this flashback, other than giving us a direct confirmation that Noland was actually ripped, is in regards to the Golden Bell of Shandora. This is the bell that Luffy is racing toward in the present day so that he can ring it for cricket, and Eneru is also after it, just because. What Calgara tells Noland about the bell recontextualizes its significance in the story and explains why the Shandians, and Wyper in particular, are so eager to have it rung again.
この鐘の音には言葉がある。言葉？死んで天に迎えられた先祖たちの魂が迷うことなくいつでもこの地に帰ってこられるように言葉を託してこの鐘を鳴らし続ける。俺たちはここにいると。鐘の音は 過去のシャンドラの確かな栄華を誇示し、その存在を海の果てまで知らしめる。
The bell that they are fighting for in the present day is more than just a bell. It is the fire of Shandora that sings to their ancestors, proves that they still survive, and proclaims to the ends of the sea that the City of Gold exists, that we are here. I think that this section does an excellent job of reframing the climactic victory of this arc due to that backstory in the bell and the importance it holds for the Shandians. Which brings us back to the present day. You know what happens from here, the battle up Giant Jack to reach the bell. Ignoring the fact that there is just this giant beanstalk growing out of the clouds, I think this is a pretty fun and concise sequence. I like that Nami uses her waiver skills to get Luffy to where he needs to go. I think having the team work to knock Giant Jack down from the base gives them all something meaningful to do, and I think it's an especially great moment for Wyper. Once Wyper is told that Luffy's goal is to ring the bell for a descendant of Noland by Robin, who then ties Luffy's actions into the theme of Romanticism, Wyper steps up to help. I mean, Wyper should have been trying to help Luffy anyway, but he's an idiot, and I think that this knocking down of Giant Jack was the best way it could have gone. Personally, I think Wyper should have sacrificed himself in the process since he used the rejectile for a third time and then pass away hearing the ringing of the bell, but whatever. I have to give it to the series, it knows how to emotionally build to the climax of its story. This final battle of the arc is one that I really didn't feel that invested in until the last handful of episodes, but it did bring me in despite the overall problems I had with it. I can't deny that. It is romantic. The animation for the Gum Gum Golden Rifle bell ring is so good. I can't do this sequence justice just by talking through it, but no, even my curmudgeon heart was warmed by this whole ringing the bell scene, and of course, Cricket's reaction to it. And even though the reveal that the giants from the Jaya Arc are just shadows in the clouds is kind of a letdown, Luffy's stupid fucking energetic, victorious pose in the clouds above the whole sea makes me bite my tongue and smile, if only for a moment. Okay, if you thought I was a little stinker before, brace yourself because I'm about to explode before I implode. I fucking hate how every single good guy in this arc is alive at the end. It's not that I'm some edgy dude who wants death and mayhem in my stories. It's that this entire arc and all the dramatic tension was built around the fact that people were dying. But then all the good guys are just alive while all the bad guys seemingly remain dead. In my last video, I mentioned how Igaram being alive at the end of the Alabasta saga bugged me, and I didn't phrase my frustration well enough, and people instead explained the logistics of his survival in the comments, rather than focusing on my real issue, which was the fact that he survived for seemingly no narrative purpose. While Igaram surviving kind of bothered me, the amount of people who survive this arc is straight up unforgivable, and now, Daddy's got a rant. And I'm Daddy. Like I said, my issue isn't that characters didn't die in this arc, my issue is that we are told characters would die. We were shown characters dying. And then, once the conflict is resolved, everyone is alive and well. Eneru states at the start of the survival game that there are like 80 people on Upper Yard and only 5 will survive. It's called a survival game, implying that those who aren't the survivors are dead. Yeah, but Eneru was wrong! Yes, he was wrong, which showed he is fallible, but him being wrong about the final count doesn't mean that he should also be entirely incapable of killing people he claims to have killed and who we witness him very obviously attempting to kill and also determining death with his mantra. So there are 2 things I've avoided talking about so far because I knew this rant was coming: mantra and the character of Isa who can use mantra. So I guess mantra is this magic power that allows those who are born with it to be able to sense the presence of those around them, to the point where when someone dies, it is a noticeable phenomenon, which is why Isa reacts very poorly to it and is the whole reason she sets out for Upper Yard. I bring this all up because not only are we explicitly shown characters like the Shandian warriors get gravely wounded, but we are told repeatedly through Isa that these characters are dead. So for them to not be dead is a huge fuck you and makes Isa's character inherently deceptive to the audience's understanding of the events. To take things a step even further, everyone being alive at the end means that Eneru was incapable of killing a single person that he attempted to. We directly witness him completely fuck up Kamakiri, the day after he was initially fucked up. We explicitly see Eneru kill Lackey, Honus' father, and a survivor of the Divine Squad, all of whom are alive and well at the end. And the Divine Squad thing is insane. Eneru just thought he killed like 100 people off screen, but really, he fucked that up too? It robs the entire build-up to the climax of a lot of its dramatic weight when you see all the victims just emerge from the woods, smiling and happy like they were just taking a nap and happened to wake up once the action was over. Lackey's death is probably the most emotional scene in the whole arc for Wyper and Isa, and it is so clearly meant to be presented as her death, more so than any other death, and the fact that she was just knocked out is a massive insult to the viewer who has invested time in the story. Without his brethren dying, what is the consequence for Wyper's demonic behavior? His arrogant pursuit of his dream at all costs, without regards for those who cared for him, goes entirely unpunished. That's just a thematic failure. Logically, Lackey is straight up electrocuted by Eneru to the point that she's fried, and keep in mind that the entire upper section of cloud she was on at the time is blown up by Eneru shortly after, which means that Lackey's burnt, unconscious body still would have fallen all the way down with the rubble. Sorry, but she should be beyond dead, and you can't convince me she's A-okay and ready for hugs once the day is saved. My issue with the lack of death in this arc is that it represents a lack of consequences for the characters, it undercuts the viewer's investment, it turns big dramatic moments into flat-out lies, makes me immediately doubt any death in the series going forward unless I see someone straight up beheaded, and for what? What narrative benefit does this story gain by having Lackey alive at the end? Or Konus' father? Or the entire before unseen divine squad? Yes, it makes for a happier ending, but that happiness feels forced. I have no problem with the idea of the characters all being alive at the end, however, it just feels like a massive failure of storytelling for that to be the case after we were shown and told over and over those characters were dying. The story should have been told much differently if that's the ending Oda was going for. I don't care that it's a shonen, it's bad writing, full stop, and it's the biggest problem I have with this entire series so far. Now, to end on a positive. It's really weird that after all my complaints, I absolutely adore the ending to this arc. I think it's so fun and charming that after a 3-day party celebration extravaganza, Luffy wakes up the crew in order to scheme to steal all the gold and book it. Fucking pirates, man. And while that is going down, Robin gets to look at the poneglyph, and that circles back around to why she first joined the crew in the last saga. Robin joined because she had lost her purpose, but after seeing Gold Roger's message on the poneglyph, she gets a renewed purpose which coincides with the crew's dreams to reach the end of the Grand Line. That is excellent writing. It doesn't take up too much time, and I don't even really know the specifics of her goal, but this saga did such a great job of telling us who Robin is and what's important to her enough that this beat felt satisfying. Of course, the absolute best part of this conclusion, maybe of the whole arc if I'm being honest, is the Straw Hats running away with their stolen gold as the Sky Islanders try to offer them a massive gold pillar as a gift. I think this scene plays to nearly every strength of the show's writing in such a concise and kinetic way. The dramatic irony on both sides makes this scene something special, and Robin just deciding to run off and follow her crew instead of taking the gold with her or explaining it to everyone else adds to this sense of carefree wonder. It isn't about the gold, it's about how the characters feel about the little adventure they're all on together to steal it. You can feel that sense of merriment bouncing out of the screen as you watch this sequence, and as the characters run off together with massive grins, I wish I was running right beside them off on their next adventure. That's what still makes this show special. And while I can't just hop into my TV and become a cartoon pirate, I will be continuing my adventure with the Straw Hats from my couch with the Water 7 saga. I know that this video was a little more critical than my previous ones have been, and I suspect that is going to turn some people off from my commentary, but I hope you at least understood why I was being a little harsh. While I really do enjoy this show, I want to be as honest as possible with the small, dedicated audience I have the honor of interacting with. I'm not being sarcastic, I really do appreciate those of you who stumbled across my little channel and stuck around. I know I don't make the best videos in the world, my editing could be much better, and my scripting isn't as tight as even I'd like, but for some reason, you guys stick around, and that means a lot to me. I want to return that dedication with my genuine feelings, as well articulated as they can be, even if that means most of you vehemently disagree with me, because when I go on to absolutely praise the show in the future, you'll know that it's because that's how I really feel, and not because it's what I think you want to hear. It was probably a mistake to try and cram the entire Sky Island saga into one video, but I won't be making that mistake again in August when I release my Water 7 video. Spoiler alert, I'm on my second watch of that whole saga because I love it so much. This video has gone on just about as long as you can stand me, I'd wager, so it's time I bring it to a close. Please let me know in the comments where this saga ranks for you. I have no idea what the consensus is out there, so whatever you guys say will be new info to me. And of course, make sure to correct me on some mistake I certainly made in this video, as has become tradition. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you stick around for the next one, but until then, I'll shut up.